news announcement!
One punch! Do 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 da 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 da. Oh, scallops, I'm recording. Most of the characters in League of Legends are known for their very interesting weapons. Kayn has Rost, Gwen has these weird scissors that are like ghost scissors. Ooh. And if you're part of the populace that hasn't seen an Aurelion Soul Main before, which I know most of you are, he fights with comets, which is just super cool. And then there's this fool. This guy is literally just beating someone to death with his fists. Just, this maniac is just clocking this god of war, thunder, brutality, ice, and cracking bone, and all this stuff. And he's losing to this mama's boy fighting with his fists. Set on a base level, just looking at his stats can seem a little overpowered. Because that was my first thought when I started playing against him. But, big but here, there's just one tiny problem with this kit. One tiny setback that ruins anything that would make this guy super cracked. And it's just...
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
His passive makes it so he regenerates based off his missing health. Note that this is not similar to Garen's, where he just gets a ton of basic health based on, like, if he's not in a fight. No, Sett gets it all the time, and it's based off of what health he doesn't have. So basically, the lower health he has, the more he'll regenerate, which can be really clutch sometimes if you're about to get ulted by like some doofus. But let's talk about his abilities, because he has these mountainous cooldowns. So what are his abilities? His Q is a auto attack reset that does way more damage. So you just go pa pa over and over again and do more damage. His W is very difficult to explain on a technical level, so listen up. His W is the inverse of Mordekaiser's, where it's based on the damage you have taken, and it will degrade over time depending on the damage you are taking. So if you do not take enough damage, it will degrade to a kind of equilibrium, if you will. So if you're jungling, you will never get up to max charges. But if you're fighting someone or a champion or something, then it will go up to max. If you go up to max, or you can do it at any time, it will turn that bar into shield, and if anyone's in that middle line, it will do true damage, and anyone outside of that, it will do just kind of basic wimpy damage, which I don't know if it's true, but I'll put on the screen if it is. But this is where Sett gets his one punch status. His W is incredibly strong because it's just true damage, and he usually builds damage. So if you do so based on the damage you deal to him, you could just straight up instantly die, especially comboed with his E, which is just a stun in both directions from him, which will pull them towards him and stun them, where he can instantly W them if he wishes. His R is a...
And his name is John C.
where you just plain suplex someone, which is always fun, but it's a lot more technically balanced than you'd think. It's very hard to use this right. You need to put them into the right position. You need to position yourself in the right spot. You can't just take them into any direction you want, like with some of these other ults. Basically, in a lot of situations, it's a lot more skill-based than just going, ha, press R. And those are all of his abilities, which have some pretty decent synergy. But all these epic abilities are very balanced by his cooldowns. Because you can't just pop off your true damage W, because then a jungler can come out of the woodworks and completely buttfuck you. And you can't just pop off your E all the time, because then you're caught out without any way of true stun. There's a lot of things that you need to take into account with Sett that I didn't think you'd need when I got into him. But he's a lot more skill based than you'd think. I would say that he's easy to pick up, but very hard to master, because you can grab this character, see what his abilities do, and then you know what's happening. His abilities, when you're just using them, you get a hang of them really, really quickly, because you're just, it's pretty easy to grab a hold of a lot of these characters. Like, I mean, I know this isn't a fair example, but compare this to Bel'Veth, to Cassante, Cassanta, yeah, we'll call him Cassanta. And compare him to a lot of the newer champions, which are 200 years of game design that have a goddamn monologue of different stuff you can do. which is not good. 200 years of game design is so annoying because it just makes it so hard to pick up these new characters. Whereas Sett, like, yes, he has a lot of he has a big monologue, but you do not have to read that to get what he does. You know what he does just by looking at what he does. You know, it's very visually distinctive, I would say. It's very visual, and you know what does damage, and you know what works. Whereas some of these characters, it's like, what the fuck is happening? What universe am I in? Where am I? A big distinction between the new players and the older players, though, is that the more you play Sett, you realize that your E needs to be managed better, so you need to start using your Q's movement speed buff, which I did not mention because, man, I don't know. It's just in the script here, dude. I read a script off. I just do this, alright? Ask the guy who made the script, alright? Which was also me. You use your Q's movement speed buff to get into the fray so you can start battling. And then once you start battling and taking damage, you can use your E and hold them still so you can either R or use your W. And personally, that was my biggest hurdle across because I'm an Orin main and it's just my thing. I really hope they change the mythic items as well because Hearthsteel is just too good on all characters, especially Sett. It really annoys me that Sett has to build Hearthsteel even though he's not going tank. Half of these builds don't go tank, they just build Hearthsteel because it's kinda good. But I'm just wondering about how the meta is right now. Sett is one of those funny characters that rushes a certain item that is not mythic. So, they rush something like Blade of the Ruined King, which is a normal look, but I tend to rush as well Hullbreaker if I'm going for a split pushing tank, and I tend to rush Ravenous Hydra, which can be really fun to use. Even though I haven't done it too much, I've had a lot of fun using it. And if you're going full tank Sett, then that's pretty good. Like, I mean, and honestly, Hearthsteel is good on Sett. Like, it's a really good item. And it goes really well with what he's trying to do, just go up and punch people. So he does a ton of damage when he does that. I think that's pretty cool. But I've been thinking of other mythic items that you can use to kind of spice it up a little rather than just using this one mythic item, which can boil your game down to really boring stat fillers, you know what I mean? So I looked into using Stridebreaker and Goredrinker, the OGs from my day, which, honestly, I think they still work pretty alright. Like, they could do better. Like, they did better all the way back in the day when Goredrinker was broken on release. And Stridebreaker has never really been a main part of the meta, and it's always been kind of used on Garen and maybe Darius, but I think it's still a pretty fun build to run up to a Xayah or something and just make it so they can't move. I mean, I have not gotten as much use out of the Goredrinker as I would like, so it's not something you're going to build in ranked, to be honest with you. But if you're getting bored of playing Sett and you want to try some different builds out, definitely try out some new mythic items. Maybe I've seen some people build Assassin Sett, which can be pretty funny. So, and I've started trying to build it, and I think it's pretty good. But if you do, I would definitely bring Prowler's Claw and Yumu's Ghostblade so you can catch up to people, instantly kill them, and then fucking book it out of there. Just get out. Just run. Run. They all know you're there. Flee. Flee. Run. And for those of you who are lore nuts, basically, he's half Vestaya and half human, and he grew up in Ionia. That's kind of the most you get out of it. His dad left, and then he becomes the overlord after being raised by a single parent, and he's a massive mama's boy. That's kind of the extent of his lore so far, from what I could tell. So if that's what you're looking for, there it is. There's not much there. Personally, it depends on what you build with him, but your placement in the game should be in the front lines. Your goal here is to take damage and then be able to dish out more damage with your W. You can't really do that if you're trying to hide behind your goddamn bot lane. So you need to keep in the front, but try to play a little bit more back than like an Ornn or a Darius would, because you don't have that super powered, not gonna die attitude. Depending on where you're playing, I would go Lethal Tempo, Conqueror, and Grasp of the Undying for top and jungle, and I would go Glacial Augment for support. And honestly, the secondary runes don't matter all too much, but Second Wind is a very big must, and Last Stand can be a very powerful asset. And last but not least, what roles you play him in? He can play a lot of roles, but honestly, I would stick to jungle, top, and support. Support, he can kind of just crush the lane or get crushed, depends on the matchup. Some of the matchups can kind of just fuck him over depending on who he's playing against. So just watch out for the matchups. Top can be a little rough if you're playing up against a good Shaco player, which in this clip I was not. This guy was a absolute goofball, and it's really rough against Teemos because, you know, his whole thing is auto attack and canceling his cooldowns. So, like, you're not gonna be able to do much. And in jungle, matchups don't matter as much because you can kind of just go hang out in the jungle, but I would look for very vulnerable teams that cannot back up. In this meta of hyper carry, speedy hyper carry, all this shit, it can be really hard for a character like Sett to keep up to date with the enemy VA or the enemy Fiddlesticks, the enemy whatever's in the jungle. Most of the time, it's going to be very hard to counter gank them because he's a pretty big slow juggernaut. So I would say don't really play jungle all too much because he's going to be a little slow on the counter ganks unless you have like God Mega Mind level IQ that you can just predict all their shit. But that's the end. If you enjoyed, do that like, comment, and subscribing thing. It means a lot. And if you didn't enjoy, dislike, and comment why you didn't like it. This is not me boosting my goddamn fucking numbers. I actually want to know why you didn't like it. Maybe I can do something to fix it. But other than that, I hope you guys have a great day.